Whelan-Ewartsville, Grange with our Peel Good Apple Festival and our speaker series. Tonight, we're excited. We're having the apple of your eye, learning on writing and photography. We're both going to have James Colwell, our president of our local Grange, who's going to be doing our photography. And we've got Claudine, who is our state lecturer and also a great author who has been published, who is here to talk to us about writing and how to do that. So with no ado, Claudine, take it away.
Welcome. I'm glad to see all of you here tonight. And those of you online, I'm glad that you were able to join us. Who am I? I'm Claudine Mincks. I am from Goldendale, Washington, and I am a member of the Centerville Grange, number 81, in Centerville, Washington, as lecturer. Columbia Grange in Lyle, Washington, number 87, as secretary. I am also Clickitat County Pomona president, and I am newly elected lecturer for Washington State Grange. And I'm here today because I was asked to come in and help you capture the essence of and character of the ones you love in writing. And so it's an excellent topic for me because as a grown-up, many years, I enjoyed with my family driving the back roads through mostly eastern Washington, and we would discover places that had been left, ghost towns, just places off the beaten track. We loved to go out on the dirt roads where people didn't often travel, and I always had my camera so I could take pictures. And with that, I could go home and over time create stories about where I had been if I could not find enough historical information about those places. And so tonight, learning about photos later and combining them with writing is what I do and enjoy the most. And so I do historical fiction. It's one way of writing. And historical fiction is basically that the time period you're talking about and the locations and facts are true, but you add your own story to them. And so it gives it a little bit more depth, especially if you don't know what happened and in that location, especially for me. And so I can take it wherever I want, drawing from both local stories that I've heard and stories that have been passed down through my family from generation to generation and add them creatively together. And so the first activity today that I wanted to do was a fun one to get us started. And so I'm going to ask some questions out in the audience. And so it should be fairly simple. Has anybody ever done a Mad Lib before?
We'll see. Mad Libs.
And so the first thing is, do I have a volunteer to tell me an adjective? Any takers?
An adjective is a word that modifies a noun.
Good job.
Great. Would you like to go first? Any adjective will do.
Small.
It helps if I have my pen on.
So small. It's all right.
And someone else throwing out another adjective.
Shiny.
Shiny. And a plural noun.
Dogs.
Dogs. A verb ending in ing, ing.
Running.
And a type of food.
Steak.
Steak. My favorite when it comes to beef. A funny noise.
Squeak.
Squeak. An adverb.
Quietly.
Quietly. And a plural noun again.
Books.
Apples.
Ooh, apples. Yeah, two apples.
Apples.
Gotta work that in somewhere.
And a verb.
R.
A beaver.
An adjective.
Restless.
Whimsical.
Whimsically.
I like that one.
Whimsically. A place.
Whelan-Ewartsville, Grange. She's like, I
How
can't
about we
spell that.
just do Grange?
That works.
A silly word.
Woo-ha.
Woo-ha. I like it. Verb ending in ing again.
Falling.
Pardon?
Falling.
Falling. And a noun to wrap this up.
Book.
A book. Okay, here we go. If I can stop myself from laughing. It was a small day at the apple orchard. We got to pick our own shiny apples right off the trees. First, we had to climb up the ladder to reach the most delicious dogs. Then it was time for a running into a big pile of apples to find the perfect one. I ate a juicy steak right there, making a squeak sound. After that, we walked quietly through the rows of trees, looking for more apples. We saw a farmer, and whimsically, basket of apples from the orchard to the store. He even let us Grange to take home for our family. My favorite part was when we went on a woo-ha and had to make a falling to find the best tasting loose. Is that books? Sorry, I can't even read my own writing. That's bad. The best tasting book. It was the best day ever. And so when we do something fun like this, because they're fun, especially on a long car ride or with friends, making them sillier, what do you think the activity taught us about the play on words and how words are important when you write? Does anybody want to take a stab at that?
Like, shiny was a great adjective for our subject matter. You could have just said red, or you could have said like nice apple, but like shiny gave it definition and you could see it.
Exactly. Descriptive is very important in writing. And it doesn't matter what kind of writing you're using. In any of it, you need to be descriptive because no one is going to want to come somewhere and participate if it sounds boring or lacks enthusiasm. And so that takes me to writing styles. Both fiction and nonfiction story, poetry, journalist articles, screenplays, journaling and blogging. And so if you think of those different ones, reporting the news in the Grange with writing. So oftentimes we use our writing styles to do something before a Grange event, during a Grange event, and after a Grange event. And so what are the type of things you would use beforehand that you would want good writing on? They're often seen in the public, on bulletin boards, in the store, in the post office.
Advertisements.
Advertisement and flyers. And then during your event, you're probably not going to get the word out in writing by sending an email or sending snail mail, but you could be online and use your social media and write up something while you're doing something. So if someone has forgotten, they can come on down and join the fun. And then afterwards, it's really important, especially if you're doing a mini fair where you're congratulating people for what they did, or someone has achieved an award in Grange or elsewhere. You would want to write a news release or a news article describing what happened, why they got it, how special they were, what did they display, and why. And so oftentimes the phrase, well, we're going to go into a phrase to describe something. And so this whole week has been different things about apple and apples. And so the apple of my eye. And so the apple of my eye, it refers to in English to someone it refers to somebody in English about someone you cherish above all others. It signifies a person who holds a special place in one's heart. You can substitute the word apple in apple of my eye as darling of my eye, heart's desire of my eye, light of my life, my eye, steady of my eye, and partner of my eye. Now, do all these examples display the same feeling to you when you hear them as apple of my eye? Or do some of them sound for different people maybe? Whereas some sound more special for those that are really special to you, like darling, heart's desire, light of my life. Steady and partner, they sound more like they're important people to you, but not quite the same as your heart's desire. And so if you're describing somebody that's special to you, why would words be important? If someone has never met you or the apple of your eye, and you're describing them and their essence and character, what kind of words would you want to use? Do I have anybody that wants to chime in?
The sunshine in my life.
Sunshine in my life. I like that. No other.
The wind beneath my wings.
Wind beneath my wings. I think there's a song. I like them all. And so that's going to take me to activity number 2, and it's a brain teaser. And I put down the apple of my eye book. So here is the apple of my eye book. And I'm going to pass around. And if you can pass them back and over, pass them back and over. So everyone gets a sheet of paper and a pencil. Okay. This book, Apple of My Eye. Now, I'm looking for you to jot down synonyms, related ideas, and new directions inspired by the word apple. So just the word apple on the book. And the book is shaped like an apple. So does this spawn any new ideas, new words, special words that you would use in a poem, a story, an article, a screenplay?
About
And it's not supposed to tax your brain so hard that I see smoke coming out. Just supposed to be fun.
these are words about apples.
Words about apples. You're the apple of my eye, such a treat in my heart. You are so good in jam, you've got a piece of my tart. Stay, be my cider, I'll always be stick with you. And I'm still seeing pins going, so I'm going to keep going. You're a dough rabble. I love you through and through. When they get sick of me reading, they'll stop writing. You're my main squeeze and forever my first pick. I think we're done. Last one. You make every day so slice. My love for you won't crumble quick. And so what are some of those words? You can just shout them out.
Juicy.
About juicy.
Pie.
Pie.
Forbidden fruit.
Forbidden fruit.
Savory and special.
Savory and special.
Sweet.
Sweet.
Cosmically wonderful.
Cosmically wonderful.
Nutritious.
Nutritious.
The perfect slice.
Perfect slice.
Worms.
Worms.
Versatile.
Versatile. And so, did any of you have duplicates that were said by someone else? Because oftentimes that can happen, especially with a word such as apple. It's always interesting what different words are inspired by different people. And so, my story with writing is kind of personal to writing about the essence and character of the people you know, because I've taken a lot of things that I've heard through the family and what my experiences have been and integrated them into my books. And it started when I was age 8 and I was staying at my grandmother's house, and she had an extra room which was special for us grandkids. And she knew I loved to read. I read all the time. I was a nerd. I loved to read. And I did not like doing sports. I know I'm in Pullman, WSU, and all sorts of sports, but I was not a sports girl. And so she gave me a brand new book, and it was called Mandy. And it was not terribly long, but it was not short. And I remember putting my glasses on, and she said, well, just make sure you turn out the light when you get tired. And I remember reading through the night until I finished the book. It was so good. I knew instantly I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write. And so the next day I shared this with my grandmother. Ironically, her name is Charlotte. This might come in key later on today. And she said, well, I think if that's what you want, Claudine, one day you're going to be a famous writer, and I am going to read your books, and I'm going to get a signed autograph from you. In the meantime, she set me up with a little desk inside her sewing room, and it had pens and paper, and I could write to my heart's content. And so I took lots of English. I was a spelling bee person because I was a nerd and liked to read. And so I took that and wrote short stories all the way through school, really. And then I went to work right out of high school. And I decided to take some college classes at night. And I was gravitating towards the arts classes, which were writing. And it was a different kind. It was called creative writing. And back then, it was different sectors of it, which I explained later were both fiction and nonfiction stories, poetry, journalistic articles, screenplays, and journaling. Now, most interesting to me was journaling and then nonfiction stories, or fiction and nonfiction stories. I did not like poetry, but you had to do a section on that for the class to pass. And I did not like writing journalistic articles. And so I was doing that and working at the same time. And I met my husband, and life kind of got in the way of writing, amazingly enough, between work and family and kids and all sorts of things. And so it curbed. And when my husband had a heart attack in 2013, I was at home with him while he was recuperating. And he knew we had been taking drives and whatnot all these years. And I had had all these stories built up in my head, notes here and there. And he said, I'm fine. I just need to rest. Claudine, go into the desk. You have time. Just write. And so I did. I went in there, and 8 hours later, I came out and I had what was to be my first manuscript. And it was called Letters in the Schoolhouse. Although that's not the first book I published, it is dear to my heart because it was my story to him. And I read it to him when I got done. He said, "You've got to read it to the girls." And so I read it to my daughters, and then I shared it with other people. And it still got curbed. It was like, it was good, but was it good enough to go out there? And more life got in the way. And when my husband passed in 2021, I had quite a few months that were not great. And then I discovered those manuscripts that I had written, and I was like, I owe this to John. And so I decided it was time. And so in doing so, I looked at them, and since I write historical fiction, I decided it would be fun to incorporate a group of sleuths into that, because I'm an old Nancy Drew fan. And so in this period of grief, I had been brought a friend, a very kindred spirited friend that was with me through the whole thing. Her name is Joyce. And it inspired me to rewrite the book slightly to include her in it, and so that we would be the kindred spirits. And so the main character in both of them is Helen and Charlotte. They're both my grandmothers, and one on either side. They both had a huge impact on me. And so when you write, I had to use all the things, even the things I didn't like, except for poetry. I kept poetry out of it until one of the books I was writing, and I had to add a little poetry in it. But so the back of the book is your descriptive. It would be like more of an article, like getting you geared into wanting to read. And so the house captured Helen's eyes while she was driving from the camping trip with her daughters on the back roads of eastern Washington. Lost in a thicket of trees and overgrown foliage, at the bottom of a deep, narrow canyon sat an empty, well-preserved central house. Helen would have no time to regret. She made the impulsive decision that led her to purchase it, thinking it would be a wonderful place to start a new life with her daughters. Instead, they would be engulfed in a mystery from the beginning. Why this house was alone in the canyon would be just the tip of the iceberg of the mysteries that would take them back through time. It was known as Ellis House in the canyon since the early 1900s. Was it haunted, or was the Ellis family just cursed by the tragic events that had happened there? Since the house couldn't speak for itself, Helen would have to do some sleuthing. She was determined to help Jack, the former owner of the house, discover the answers to the secrets that had torn his family apart. Using her research background, Helen dove into the mystery. She soon found a kindred spirit friend, Charlotte, who would become her fellow sleuthing partner. Helen would find that solving mysteries of the Ellis family not only would be healing for souls, but for her and her daughters as well. And so that's a more descriptive type of article. It's supposed to grab you. And then they told me to do something totally impossible, write about myself in a very plain Jane way that would get you to know me more like an article. I struggled with this a long time. In fact, it got delayed in the latter parts of the publication because they wanted me to do it, and I didn't want to. About the author, Claudine had an avid love of books from a very early age, as she can recall. By age 8, she was jotting down her stories in a notebook. She also journaled regularly, despite feeling her life was anything other than ordinary. Even though Claudine took a creative writing class in college, she would not pursue her writing talents until much later in life. Her dreams of becoming an author was curtailed by a career in the business world to help co-support her family and their lives together, with her late husband John and daughters Erin and Sarah. Claudine's favorite pastime is driving the back roads and discovering old buildings and places where history comes to life for her and her foster stories about her finds. She notes that combining history with mystery and a side of romance makes her stories come alive from the locations that she has come across over the years. When managing a small, mostly Hereford cattle herd landed in her lap, a love of cows was realized. Claudine soon became the quirky amateur cow whisperer and found a fun and different writing style in blogging her cow adventures. You can find her online as the Amateur Cow Whisperer, where she has a unique way of comparing human and cow characteristics. Since retiring from the business world, Claudine has renewed a passion for her dream of being an author. Now she spends her days writing fictional stories, non-fictional journaling, and blogging. Faith in God, love of family, and fellowship with friends are most important to Claudine. Daily time spent with these aspects keeps her grounded, and her spirited and energetic grandsons keep her young at heart. And so, did each of the different readings tell you something different in a different form? I'm hearing yeses.
Yes, sorry.
And so one is descriptive about the book, one is more autobiography. And so different ways of writing are important, especially when you are writing a book. You have to sometimes do things you don't want to do. Otherwise, they're not going to sell. And I like to tell my stories. I don't really care if they sell that much. I know that's kind of backwards, but. And so my last activity for you guys is pass the story. And so with those same pieces of paper, if you would jot 3 sentences or so, start a story, just very basic. And so each person is going to start the beginning of a short story with about 3 sentences or so, just to get it started. And while they do that, I will entertain those online with just a small section of this same book. Well, of course that's why you've come. I knew you would someday. I suppose Nick told you everything he did, Francisca asked. Grandpa Nicholas? Jack asked, not sure if that's who she was talking about. Oh, that's right. Nick went back to Nicholas after Addie. I always forgot. But he'll always be Nick to me. You know, we all grew up here in Barrows together at the same time. Such fun times those were. The barn dances, the sleigh rides, the socials. Oh, it was the time of our lives. Nick and I spoke often. But after Addie disappeared only once, exactly a year later, right here on this porch. He was such a mess, all torn up inside, not wanting to even believe what he knew in his own heart. Then, to add to his misery, I had to be the one to tell him his own father had killed his mother. Francisca stopped, sipped her lemonade, and relaxed in her chair. Everyone else on the porch, including Gabby, was speechless and wide-eyed. They were all thinking the same thing. Had she just said that Charles had killed Vivian? They all waited to hang on to her every word, not wanting to miss one thing. And now, once you're done with those few sentences, if you pass it to the person on your left.
Oh no. Oh no.
Now, don't read what the person wrote.
Don't read what they
No, don't read.
You're
Oh, you're
keeping
not
your own. You can't keep your own.
Don't keep your own. It's okay.
So you're not supposed to read it at all?
Well, good. I'm not
Oh my
doing
God.
Yeah, don't. I was supposed to tell you to fold it so they couldn't see anything but the last sentence, but it's okay.
Last sentence?
Yeah, so read
Oh,
that
so you got
last.
something
Yeah,
Okay.
read that last sentence and then just start writing how you would finish that from that last sentence. I have them all confused now. Jack's diesel truck rumbled through, interrupting Helen's thoughts on the project she should be working on next. This past week had been a warm one. Although she should really pull some weeds around the perimeter of the house, she really wanted to dive into some research on the wagon train records she'd found in the museum. She was astounded that the wagon train records were from 1874, and they were in excellent condition, preserved in a climate-controlled room of the museum. It would be a great exhibit for the annual winter formal dinner and dance fundraiser in December. Although, with the enormity of the project, perhaps not this December, but the next one would be even better. She opened the front door of Ella's house just as the truck came to a stop on the footbridge. She walked up to it while Jack stayed seated in behind the wheel. They had become great friends, and there was rarely a day that didn't go by that they didn't at least speak to each other. I don't feel like working today, Jack said. I thought maybe it'd be a great day to take those four-wheelers up. We could go exploring on the old Monroe homestead on the canyon bluff. Nell and Lena have been pestering me about it all summer. I must admit, I'd like to check it out too. What do you say? Want to join us? And I see that pins are almost ready to stop writing. And then we're going to put those two things together and see what people came up with. And do I have anybody? I'm going to grab some. And I'll wait for the last two, but we'll start here. The wind started to blow. The wind started to blow, and the storm front came in. Jack was scrambling to get all the chickens into the brightly painted coop. His yellow door made him smile, even as a tear began stinging at the corner of his eye. Molly had been so happy when she had found the perfect color. Scott grumbled over in search of a pencil and an exit. Writing, especially spelling, is not for him. Why did he always say yes to what Amanda asked of him? He resigned himself to the fact that he was lost in his feelings for her. She was unlike anyone he'd known, dynamic, full of energy, and passionate, so different from the life he knows. In the quiet of the moonless night, Maria stepped briskly through the cold air on her way to her friend Nick's house. She was in a rush as she was late to get to the Grange for the potluck dinner, knowing that the ceremony is late. She wouldn't have the best dishes to choose from.
Gee, I want to get there, and there's only that Jello salad. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Carrots in
yes.
it?
If it was Jello salad for me, it'd be great.
Carrots in it?
Oh, not carrots, no. Once upon a time, on a dark and stormy night, the apple trees were resting peacefully. It was harvest time and time for the test taste of the year. The Apple Fest was coming and the best celebration of the year was here. So with that little exercise, what did you learn? Did the stories continue with the same theme, or as the first author started, or did they go a different direction? Some of them were kind of in between.
Depending on the last sentence of the first author, whether or not it gave you enough information to continue the story.
Exactly. It really mattered what that last sentence was. If it was real descriptive, it was probably easy to carry forward. If it was not, then it would not have been easy to carry forward. If you were collaborating on an article for Grange about the Apple Pill Festival, I'm not sure that's the right name or not,
The peel good.
but if you were collaborating after the event and after tonight even, and you sat down and you were writing together as a team or separately, putting your own components in, would it matter if it was cohesive, if you guys were using the same kind of tone, or if you were completely abrupt from each other? If someone was reading that later, what would they think? Were they at the same place? Did they experience the same thing? Which sometimes you can experience the same thing and take from it different things, but the writing style should be somewhat the same so that it flows together. And so the last piece of information I'm going to share with you is on journaling, which is especially special to me. I have never heard of this type of journaling. And when I was researching to do this tonight, I found it, and I found it very inspiring. So has anybody here heard of 3-2-1 journaling?
No.
It is a versatile technique that can be adapted for different purposes, most commonly for gratitude and self-reflection. Every morning or evening, you write down 3 things that you're grateful for, and 2 things that made you smile, and 1 thing that you want, 1 experience that you want to remember. So 3 gratitude, 2 smiles, 1 experience you want to remember. The research in this shows that spending just a few minutes each day looking for 3 new things to be grateful for can strengthen or rewire our brains and increase positivity over time. This practice trains the brain to notice and appreciate positive aspects of life, leading to increased happiness, reduced stress by lowering the cortisol levels, and improved overall well-being. Now, you can also take this into a learning strategy for students, prompting the students to record 3 takeaways, 2 questions they still have, and 1 interesting fact that they learned on the subject. Or additionally, there's a version to boost productivity by identifying 3 small tasks, committing to 2 minutes to start one, and finding 1 reason to continue it. So I thought that might be kind of inspiring to think, maybe I should try this. Are there any questions out there that you would like to ask me about writing or the techniques I talked about?
That goes for people online.
And if there's any online, Amanda's going to tell me what they are, and I can certainly answer them or try.
So when you're writing, is there a place that you feel like you get inspired by most? How do you find where you're going to probably write the best, and what might inspire you if you're like seeking it? If you feel like you kind of run dry for a little bit.
I do. I should have known you'd going to ask me that question,
Right.
because that's what I've been struggling with. Instantly, I always wrote. My house was very small that I had with my late husband and 2 daughters growing up. There was always kids in the house. Things were always going on, and I could always write or do my projects just out on the table in the kitchen, and things were going around me, and I would just not pay attention. And after the kids grew, it still was kind of my favorite spot. That's where the grandkids are a lot of the time, and myself. And after John passed, it became very difficult for me to find that place that I could just write. And I have been struggling with that the last 3 years. I think I find a spot and it works for a while, and then I find another one. And so right now, it's just kind of where that moment takes me. I don't need it to be quiet necessarily, but people around me need to realize I'm probably not listening to what they're saying, as was found out this afternoon. So I get engrossed in it. I oftentimes do like scenery the best. I like to be able to see something. So in my old kitchen, there was big French doors, and I could look outside into my garden, and I could see all the flowers and everything, and that kind of inspired me. And it took me back where I had been, because I write about places I have been. So it pulls me back into those places. I oftentimes pull out pictures of places I've been so that I can see them, I can feel them, because I've done a lot of history on them, research on them while I've been doing the writing. And so it pulls me back in to look at those pictures and remember when I explored those places.
So when you develop characters based on places that you've been, does it come from the research you do in terms of the history of the area, or are they just something that just come from inside you?
Oftentimes, when I develop the characters, they're characters that are already in my head, and then because people are always giving me ideas. Oh, go look at this old house. You can write about it. It's more of a feeling. And so when I'm there, I think of those characters, of what might have happened there, and then I go back and I do research on the history, and sometimes I kind of intertwine a little bit of it, and sometimes it's just completely random. And with the first book I wrote, House in the Canyon, that I read some experts out of, they were characters from stories I had heard. And then the house was real. It was in a canyon. It burned 3 years ago, about the same time my husband passed. And it was always a favorite haunt that we went back to year after year, different seasons. And so I didn't want to go back there, because the book was about to be published, and here the house had burned. But in getting it out in the local area, people started seeing it, and they were like, oh, that's that house. Did you know this happened there? Is this really what happened? And so then people were telling me stories about the house. And one of the things that I found so interesting, I'm going through the coffee line at the local place to get a drink, and she's like, I grew up over there with my cousin. Did you know there's trails behind the house and you can walk up the canyon? And I'm like, no, I did not know that, but that's what I wrote in my book. And so it was kind of fun to see that what I wrote actually was true. And so sometimes that you have that fluke that happens. So where your imagination meets reality, and it wasn't planned. And same with characters, same thing, because it was two cousins that were friends that traveled up there. And in my book, it was just two friends also.
So if we're writing to capture the essence of somebody that we love, are there any things to avoid that you would suggest, or are there any last tips that might not just be the norm that you've found that maybe you wouldn't give to everyone?
I think you have to be really careful when you're describing someone, someone that's special to you. And when you do research, I also do genealogy research. I found some things in my family that, they were probably kept out of the family stories because they were hurtful. But not knowing that, you wouldn't know that coming in 3 generations later. And so you have to be real careful, because what is dear to you or not dear to you could be completely opposite to someone you really care about and you love. And by saying different words or describing different people could hurt them. And those are the ones you love, and they're here today, and you don't want to do that. And so my other thing is pet names. A lot of people, they overuse pet names, and the recipient isn't so happy about them. So when you write something to someone you love, the apple of your eye, be careful that they want to be called the apple of your eye, because sometimes people don't like pet names. So we have a dog named Wilson here. All I think about is Home Improvement every time I hear Wilson, and the important thing over the fence.
All right, I think that's a good transition for
Okay.
you to.
I'm going to turn it over, and we're going to talk about photography next and
Mhm.
capturing the essence of the one you love in photography.
Are we ready?
You're ready.
All right. Well, again, my name is James Colwell. I'm the president of Whelan-Ewartsville Grange. I came from a Grange in Montana prior to being in Washington. I came here actually as an electrical engineer. I work for Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories. What I'm going to talk to you today about is something that is near and dear to my heart. It also comes from a very organic place like your writing does. The ideas can be something that you just created in your head, something that just caught your eye and you thought that needs to be in an image somewhere. We're going to talk a little bit about Apple of My Eye, and my inspiration for this presentation was actually my daughter. You're going to see some pictures that she and I collaborated on during an assignments that she did in her high school, as well as some things that I did on my own, and just a variety of different techniques. So everybody is probably familiar with this kind of guy, right? This is a professional camera. You know, by the time you're done, they're very expensive, they're heavy. The advantage is there's a lot of resolution in here. There's obviously tons of settings and a variety of things that you can do with it. The disadvantage again is the weight, the cost. That's a big one. And of course, everybody has these now, right? And these are digital cameras, just like what that is. Difference might be is resolution. Some of it might be a little bit in terms of what kind of settings you can play with. The amount of apps out there these days that you can download that give you access to some things that normal, your just normal photo app doesn't necessarily give you is crazy. One of them, ones that I actually downloaded for my iPhone is called ProCam. And it gives you access to everything in there in terms of ISO, your exposure, things about your flash, different filters, different things like that you have access to. The only one it doesn't give you access to is part of the triad, the triangle here, if you want to go to the next slide. So we talked about ISO. We talked about shutter speed. Okay, that's just how long is my exposure. Okay, and then the last one is aperture. So that is the only thing that you don't have access to when you have the phone. Okay, you can't change how big that aperture on your phone is, where on a lens I can do that with. Okay, so one part of this is, so if you can't change your aperture, then the other two have to make all the adjustments for what your exposure is going to look like. Okay, but we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you can do with those cameras to be able to get really good shots. Okay, and go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, my inspiration for this was my daughter. Okay, this was a picture she took with her phone, and I love it because it's whimsical. It was part of where that word came from when we talked about it earlier. It also was just very happy, very funny. And it actually hits on one point that I usually say is watch what you put in your image. You know, sometimes you want to fill the full frame, right? This isn't a crop image. She just stuck the camera right in her face and away she went. But of course, it was at high school. It's full of color. It's full of life and energy and excitement. And again, it's just kind of funny, right? Other parts about it, when you take pictures of your loved ones, okay, focus on their eyes, okay? That's usually the one thing that you want to make sure that is in focus. And so one thing that's really good about our cameras on our phones is that they're actually attuned to look for your eyes, and that's what they focus upon. So it actually does a little bit of that work for us, okay? Let's go to the next one. So we talked a little bit about what you put in your picture, okay? So one of them is you fill the whole frame with your subject, okay? Others might be what else do you put in the frame, okay? Around here, of course, we are very familiar with the wheat fields, right? And so these are a very popular draw amongst professional as well as just tourist photographers that come around here because of all the wonderful colors and the rolling hills. Well, we're not immune to it with the kids too. They love to take these images. So now, while this one was taken with a point and shoot, which is not totally dissimilar between your phone and here, it gives you some controls that you may not have on your phone. It does show, again, some other things that you can incorporate. One is kind of the golden hour, okay? We talk about lighting, okay? When you're not able to use some sort of artificial light, we want to use what we have available to us. In this case, you take pictures just before sunset, so you get this nice kind of warm glow in your imagery, okay? So Ari was out with some of her friends taking pictures and stuff like that out by the wheat field that she uses on her social media, okay? So that covers kind of content and lighting. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about lighting. As part of her project, go to the next one. You can make your images dramatic, okay? And it's interesting. So some of these shots are done in kind of a film noir type atmosphere, kind of in terms of a subject matter. And so some of these were done with very specific subjects in mind. So this was film noir, okay? So you imitate, like say, sometimes a shot that you may have seen from the 1940s or 50s or something like that. And you might say, okay, how did you get the light just on her eyes, right? This is simple. I mean, it's just almost silly. You take a piece of cardboard and you cut a hole in it and you shine a light through it so that everything else is kind of dark except for what you want to light up. And again, it's the eyes, right? So, and in this case, she's not smoking. This is a piece of rolled up paper. And it does have a lighter that's underneath her there. And again, we were trying to recreate kind of a mood of something like they back in the 50s. So making it dramatic, doing something that actually draws your eye to the image that makes it stand out, right? We can go to the next one. So as part of this, we wanted to do something kind of as like a sleuth or something of a gangster type thing. And so, pardon, there is a gun in this, but we wanted to do something that was actually like that, right? We're looking for somebody that, you build some suspense into your image, okay? In this case, I'm looking out the window as if something's coming to get us, right? And so we shot this out my front window. How do you develop the light here? We actually literally took an LED light, put it on a tripod on the outside of the window so that it had light coming in like if somebody was driving down your street, right? And you play with this, right? You just do something that's fun, okay? And that's what photography is about for me. It's like doing something different, something unusual, and just trying things. One thing that was different back in the day when I started taking photography was these things only had so many pieces, so many shots you had on a roll of film, right? So you had to have pockets full of film if you were going to take a bunch of them. Well, so as part of the stuff that I regularly used to do was athletic photography for roller derby, okay? And after a single bout, I would have over 2,000 shots on a single bout. you didn't do that for film. You had to be very selective about the film, the shots you would take. So that is not the case anymore. Your phone, these kind of things, you can shoot as much memory basically as you have. And if you have another card, which is way easier to put in there than another roll of film, you can just keep shooting all day. I have literally gone home after a doubleheader bout at Derby and had over 6,000 images that I had to go through. And that's probably the worst part about taking that many images, is that you have so many to go through to say, okay, well, that one's good, that one's not so good, right? And so, but you have the option of taking lots of different types of shots and playing around with this because you're not limited by anything but the memory that you may have on your device. Let's go on to the next one. So the other thing, one thing that digital cameras maybe aren't so good at, our eyes are very good at seeing dynamics. Okay, so things that are very bright, very dark, our eyes can see both without too much effort. Digital cameras are not so good. So one of the things you have to kind of focus upon is when you want a subject to be well lit, you need to meter or have your camera, usually by touching the screen on your phone, for instance. Same thing actually with a digital camera like this. You choose what you want it to meter on, what should be lit up the best, okay? And this thing will, and the camera will actually make adjustments within the exposure to make sure that that is lit. What that will often do, though, is sometimes it'll blow out the things that are very bright. So in this case, though, artistically, the sun being very bright, we're familiar with that. And so having those beautiful colors over the ocean and stuff like that, and that works pretty well in this kind of case. So, and again, this was a selfie. So other than just being able to look at the screen, tap on it where I was at, and then hitting the shutter button, basically, that's all this is. So very simple. And again, with certain things like ProCam and things, that's again one app that I use. I can play with this if I want to try to get different effects out of it. Okay. Sometimes that might be putting a filter on it. All cameras now have a black and white setting. So you can actually take images and stuff in black and white or color and go back and edit them or change them or take them in black and white to begin with. All right, since we're talking about lighting, we'll go to the next one. So this was a project that Ari had to do, okay? And it's about bokeh, okay? That's the word that's at the bottom. Spelled a little funny, that's spoken, right? But that's that blurry background, right? So the object that you're trying to focus on is the only thing that's in focus. So the way you do that with, a DSLR is you open up the aperture wide open on the lens, and then you make other adjustments to the camera to get the exposure that you want. By opening up that lens, the depth of field, okay, where that image will be focused, is very narrow, okay? And so things that may not be very far behind your subject, in this case only about 14, 15 inches, look very, very far away, very, just very blurry, right? So in this case, it's just a little set of fairy lights, right? Like you would hang, like what we've got actually hanging above us here, that are lit up in the background that provides that kind of backdrop. And then she put a black sheet behind that so that it just had some good contrast. So you could very easily do this with somebody that you wanted to take a picture with, okay? You can go to the next one. So similarly, you might do this in a studio or in your living room, okay? If you have a backdrop that you create that can be white, it could be black. You hang it on something that you can put up in there so that you can hang it up behind you. And then if you just put a light right behind somebody, okay, and if you put a filter on it, something to give it some color, you can actually create a nice effect with somebody's hair, or almost give them a halo effect if you want. So, lots of different things that you can do with lighting. Again, stuff that you can do whether you're outside, and again, where you put the light on somebody can change the effect that you get. All right, next one. Or you can add movement, okay? This was an interesting assignment that she had to achieve, and this is something that I do in derby photos a lot, is I stand on the inside corner as skaters go around the corner, and I try to track them with a longer exposure. And it's very difficult because you have to keep that skater in the exact same spot on the frame of your camera while you're moving, so that everything in the background is blurry, but they stay nice and focused. Well, the other trick is they've got to stay motionless, right? As they're going around a corner, they can't be skating. If they move, then everything in the picture is moving too. So we were trying to figure out, and we tried several different things during an afternoon, how to make this happen. And it kind of came to me that, you know what, hey, this park has a merry-go-round. So let's set up a tripod, okay? And so literally you could have something like this that has a bracket that holds onto a phone. And you sit there inside the merry-go-round, and you have your friend sit on the outside of the merry-go-round, and they just, you know, perch their face in through one of the gaps, right? And then you can take the shot very easily by just having somebody spin the merry-go-round. So, and you can create this potentially at home by doing something like that, right? So, and again, that could be as simple as somebody, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend this as far as being in your vehicle doing this, but you could do it out the back window while somebody else is driving. You could take a shot through the window and have stuff moving, you know, through the background. All right, next one. All right, so everything I've shown you so far is very specific to the subject, right? They are what's the focus, okay? But you can change it up, right? Perspective is another thing that you can actually play with. Now, I can't tell necessarily who's in the background of those images. One of them is me. But they are people that I love, right? My brothers are in the one on the beach, right? But again, you just put something else in the foreground. And here's again a use of bokeh so that you can, you know, again, have something in the background that reminds you of where you were at, what you were doing at the time, and who you were with, right? Now, somebody else may not necessarily know who they are, but you can tell that they were important because I have them in the image, right? Or something that I enjoy doing, playing guitar, you know? So having two things in there that actually are important to you. Now, I'm an astrophotographer. We'll go to the next image. I didn't put any of those in this slide deck. But I do want to talk a little bit about long exposures, okay? This is a very difficult image to see. But what this was is a 30-second image, again, taken in a very dark room with a flash strobe. So when you have a flash, in this case, she was activating it by hand. And what I was doing was just moving my head and changing my expression each time so that you get these flashes of some personality of what's going on in the image. Very cool idea. I thought it was just really fun. It wasn't actually what the teacher was asking for, but we had a really good time with it, and it went off very well, I thought. Almost strangely, we got the angles just about right too. It took a few shots to do it, but it worked out really well. All right, go on to the next one. So we talked about long exposures. Now let's talk about multiple exposures, okay? So I already had an assignment of kind of doing this almost multiple personality thing, which ended up where I ended up in that image. But we also wanted to do something that meant, you know, like having somebody in two different or three different or four different places at the same time, right? Like you had twins. And so this is images where you set your camera up on a tripod and you take multiple images of the same scene, but one thing moves. So then you come back in, and here's where editing comes into play. You bring all those images into like Photoshop or Lightroom or something like that. And then you mask the subject. So you pull that piece out and you drop it into the other image because you have something that registers where they're at in each image. So you just keep dropping them in. So you could actually put as many as you want in here, or a whole crowd of the same people, the same person in the picture. It takes a little bit of time, but you get a pretty cool effect when you do it. All right, next one. So we don't always take pictures of just things that are, you know, again, near and dear to our heart. Sometimes we want to do something that's art photography, or something that might be, again, something that is a little unusual. And so just taking, I will say, everyday objects, and again, applying lighting to them and staging them in a certain way allows you to actually get some kind of crazy different effects, right? So one is on the right is a set of hole saws, just Milwaukee hole saws. And stacking them up and applying just a little different lighting to them, you can get some really kind of cool effects to what, it doesn't look necessarily like hole saws. On the left, that image is of just a lock, but with a background that actually is somewhat reflective, and with the lighting in the right place, it kind of made the lock look like it was smoking. So again, lighting and the way that you actually can stage your image and stuff like that can give you lots of different cool effects. All right, next one. Now this one was just random. I don't know necessarily why I threw it in here other than I thought it was kind of cool. So while we were at the beach, I happened to wander by a spot where the sand was just shifted just because the water came through it just right. And so sometimes images are just, again, momentary inspiration. Oh, that looks cool. And so setting up and just having the light in the right kind of orientation so that you get contrast on some of the relief that is in your image gives it a little bit of life, and that you can actually kind of maybe see what that process looked like when it happened. All right, and I'm about to round up, and I saved, I think, the best for last. All right, so dramatic lighting. All right, so this is something that I always wanted to try. Ari had to have a special lighting project, and so I thought, let's give this a go. So a little, let's see, what's the word I'm looking for? A little warning, don't set yourself on fire if you ever try this. Okay, so this is actually done very simply. You actually get like a stainless steel whisk. You hook it to the end of like a dog leash, and then you stuff it full of steel wool. Light it on fire, and then spin it really fast. And as you add oxygen to that steel wool that's burning, it throws sparks. And so that's me sitting in the middle in a nice heavy coat and a hoodie, because this was actually in the middle of February down on the river near on the Snake here at Boyer Park. So we wanted to have the edge of that little area so that it was nice and smooth. So we had a reflection surface there to be able to catch some of it. And then in the background, you can see that the lighting and stuff for, some of the restrooms and stuff there into the background. But this was a really cool project. This was Ari's image, obviously, because I'm the one in the subject in here. But I had set up my camera out here at the same time for the same image, and I wanted to get something a little broader. So I'm an astrophotographer, so my image was actually wider. And it just so happened that Orion, one of my favorite subjects when we take astrophotography, was actually right straight above this. And so mine was black and white, where you could actually see all the stars in the night sky that were right above all of this. So I didn't include that here because I wanted to focus on some of the ones that Ari had taken. But again, if you were willing to experiment, to do something fun, maybe it's even just recreating a shot that you've seen somewhere. And it can be fun just learning how to do that, right? Bring somebody that you love along. Have fun with it. And I don't know, it may take you in places that you never thought you'd ever go. I'm by nature a landscape photographer. People aren't usually my thing. I've done weddings. I've done graduation photos. Working with people is harder. And so you have to, and I think everybody knows this, right? It's hard to make sure that you get all the right shots, keep everybody happy, things like that. You don't deal with that when you're out in the landscape, right? You can shoot all day long. Nobody's really going to bother you. But sometimes, it just like everything else, it takes persistence. You have to stay with it. There were shots that I've taken over the years that took me 4 years to get the one that I wanted. Sometimes the lighting wasn't right. I wanted it at a specific time of year. And so you have to stay with it. But anyway, so that's all I've got for you today. Get out there, have fun with your cameras. I don't care if it's like one of these. I don't care if it's one of these. Grab yourself a tripod if you want to take pictures of yourself, whether you're actually not holding it. And just go out and enjoy yourselves. And don't be afraid to edit shots too. Some people talk about adding saturation and things like that. That's not real. That's fine. It's actually artistic. It is just absolutely how you want it to look when it's done.
So I have a question.
Thank you. Fire away.
Okay, so if you know somebody who's really terrible at taking selfies,
Yeah.
can you give them like a 2-minute crash course on how to grab their phone and come forward to this part of the room and take better selfies?
Let's see here. How to take a good selfie. So you actually have to be interested in taking the image and being in it. That'd be a good start. What you have in the background might be fun, right? So although it doesn't have to be, obviously the first image I showed was just of Ari's face, right? That was it. Now, again, you have to be willing to be in a shot like that. So being up close and personal with a camera isn't always for somebody. Again, you gotta be inspired. You gotta have fun with it, right? So the phones do a wonderful job of taking images. You don't usually have to work too hard at it. But you do need to make sure that you're in it and that you're in the moment doing it. If you've decided that this is just something you're doing because somebody told you to do it, the emotion isn't going to come through in that image, right? But it may be fun to do grumpy ones occasionally. It's like, I didn't want to do this. I was at a wedding the other day. I took we had a frame that they actually are just passing around. And everybody was taking pictures, and the group that I was with had all jumped in one. And I was sitting there, and they're like, "Oh, you got to get in one." I'm like, so I flipped it and went, "Oh, portrait, it's just me," you know. And they're like, "No, everybody got in there." So everybody kind of behind me, and I stood there at the bottom of the frame. And just before they took that, I just went, ah! Like I just got crazy because everybody else was smiling, and I thought, okay, I got to do something different than everybody else, right? But that's what it takes. You gotta, again, be inspired, just be crazy. Enjoy doing what you're doing in the moment, and something interesting may come of it. So I don't have a recipe for that. You just like say, other than just you have to be there, you have to want to be doing that. Just like anything else that we do creatively, there's an inspiration to it, a love of what you're working on that makes you want to do it and to play with it. So, any other questions?
Do you have a favorite picture that you took of landscape?
Oh yeah. So the first image that I ever put in my own house was mine, at least of those that I've got. And I brought my portfolio today. I probably should have got it out. So yes, I do have one. Zion National Park was, I don't know, it's an inspiration for just about anybody that goes there. It's color country in southern Utah at its finest. All the reds, yellows, oranges, whites, again, in the greens, all that kind of blended together. And then these huge landscapes of these almost incredible rock structures everywhere. But then there's also these sides of places where it's hard to get to. Slot canyons in Zion National Park are a big draw for people who like to, dive into some kind of deep, dark spots. Some of them, the water is always cold. It might be 95 or 105 degrees out in the middle of summer in Zion or higher. But that water is ice cold because it came out of the rock. And so that brings a whole new challenge. How do you bring your gear in there and not get it wet, right? Because you're swimming through some of this stuff. But one of the shots that I took was actually in Zion National Park. It was just above a place called the main part of the subway that some people may have recognized. But the picture that most people take is actually down from this area. I wanted to go upstream where there's a little waterfall that you have to climb over. And what was really cool about that shot was not only the color in the rock and the fact that just the way that I don't know if you've ever seen video or pictures of Whiptail Falls in Yosemite during certain parts of the year, the sun comes through it and you get this firefall. It was the same. You actually had this light that came in and it funneled through the light into this just dark area. And so you see just a light fall. And actually that's what I called the image when I was done with it, was light fall. What was also cool about it was all of the sand in the bottom was this just beautiful golden color, and it had all these ripples in it, and the water was only about that deep. So it all showed very nicely. Nobody had been walking through it. It was all pristine. And then some of the rocks that, framed it were this almost iridescent blue when I took the image. So it was gorgeous. I spent a lot of time picking out the matting for it, just to get all the colors and stuff to pop out of it. But it is by far my favorite image. Interestingly, it wasn't the first image I sold. So my images are all over the world. I've got images in the UK. I've had lawyer's office buy 28 of them from me back in Utah. But the first image I showed was one I actually almost never put in my portfolio. I just thought there was something missing from it. And the lady that bought it just loved it. I will say that she put it into a bathroom, but it was the first one I sold of like 18 to that family. So it was, again, you're your own worst critic, right? And so I put it in just because it was like, yeah, that's really cool, but I could have done that better. And it was the first one I sold. Anything else?
We have 2 questions online for Claudine. And
Awesome.
if there's anyone who has questions for you online, they better get them in quick.
Okay. Well, I'll step aside for a second then. Thank you.
All right, Claudine, you've got 2 questions. How do you use voice to text to write, or do you do handwritten stories first? And then will AI affect the way you write, since all programs try to change people's writing?
I hate AI. It was trying to correct something I was typing today, and it kept correcting it. And I finally, and I was thinking, where is my youngest daughter? Because she would know how to turn it off for me. Because I'm always so busy doing a project, I don't have time to learn the programs as well as I should. I do use my voice recorder at times, especially when I'm retired from the cows now after 15 years. But often when I was out in the barn wandering around in the wintertime, I always had my phone, which has a voice recorder on it. And so not only taking pictures, but if something struck me, like, oh geez, that's what I want to say, I'd voice record, because oftentimes my hands were cold and I couldn't feel them, or they're mucky and you can't feel them. And I love Siri because you can make her turn it on and talk right into it. And then later I would pull from it and be able to take where I want it to go, especially when I'm in kind of a writer's block. But I despise AI. It doesn't speak from the heart. It tries to generalize. It says it's improving the way, but sometimes the improvement is not what you're trying to get across. It's not your story then. And so it has its uses, but not for me in my writing.
Perfect. Any more questions?
No more on the chat.
No more on the chat. Well, I'd like to thank both James and Claudine for coming in and finishing up our speaker series for our Peel Good Apple Festival. It's not too late to finish partaking in some of the fun. We've got bingo tomorrow night here at the hall, fully family friendly. It's going to be a great event. We've got some really good prizes donated for it, so looking forward to that.
Including from
I'm
both
giving
of them.
away some of my pictures.
Some pictures,
And I
signed
give it away
book.
a signed book, yes.
Yeah, so there's some awesome things there that are going to be one-offs that are really neat. We've got Saturday, we've got our pigskin and potluck. We're going to have some yard games going on. We got the old cider press out. We're going to grind up some cider, just have a good time of fellowship. And you'll get to see all the entries for our All Things Apple contest. And we will be taking entries up until 9 o'clock Saturday. So if you've never been out to a Grange Hall event, please get the chance to come out. I know we're busy and can't always make all of them, but if you are looking for some good fellowship and time just to enjoy life with people, it's always a great event. So we're going to let you go tonight, and those of us that are here are going to spend some time enjoying some fellowship. So I'm sorry you're all missing out on this one, so don't miss it out on the next 2 nights. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.